this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just Peyton Manning. I'm also motivating Manning. When I say insurance, you say financial services. Insurance. Financial services. Insurance. Financial services. Now when I say nationwide, you say is both. Nationwide. Is both. Nationwide. Is both. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 1070 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Just a reminder, but with it being week 16, this 15 transactions episode, it's very, very focused on waiver wire ads only. It's essentially just a giant waiver wire column for you. There aren't any buys and sells, as we've established in the past. Another thing to point out, though, is that I don't have a ton of drop transactions. I actually have gotten some emails from people where they're like, hey, all of these ads, they're great, but what about 15 drops that I can make? And I get that. But my response is the process for creating content around drop candidates, it's a lot different than ad candidates. You see, with ad recommendations, I'm giving you a rundown on the up-to-date landscape in fantasy football. Injuries happen, players emerge, they become talking points. They become guys that we want on our rosters. With drops, we're talking about like hundreds of potential players. The consideration set is really, really big. But for ads, we may only care about 10 to 15 players each week because not many low-rostered players have a chance to truly help our fantasy rosters. That's why there's always going to be far more ads than drops. And that's the case once again this week. Now let's get these rosters of the fantasy championship. Add Michael Carter. So how fitting is it that with 2 weeks to go, we're still talking about this Arizona Cardinals backfield? It feels like we've been doing this every single week since late September. We've seen a rotation of running backs in Arizona all year. But here's where it currently stands. It's Michael Carter and Amari DiMercato. James Conner's been done for the season for a while now. Trey Benson wasn't able to get off IR. And then Bam Knight hurt his ankle in week 15. He was carted off, and now his injury is being reported as a bad sprain. So hypothetically, if this is the Carter DiMercato show from here on out, Michael Carter should be in store for some fantasy production. You might remember this, but we saw sort of the same scenario in week 5. That was before Bam Knight kind of emerged as a relevant piece in this offense. In that week 5 matchup against Tennessee, Carter had a solid 59% snap share. He saw 72% of the team's running back rushes. This past week in a negative game script against Houston, Carter had a 78% running back rush share and an 80% snap share. Now, those numbers are really high. I don't think they're going to be that high over the next couple of weeks because Amari DiMercato in week 15, it was his first game back from injury. That Bam Knight sprained ankle, it occurred mid-game. So I don't know if we're going to see Michael Carter as like a true bell cow in this Cardinals offense over the next 2 weeks. But like a 70% running back rush share and a few targets per game, that's definitely in his range of outcomes over these next 2. And Arizona gets Atlanta and Cincinnati to close out the fantasy season. Those are 2 great matchups for running backs. So Michael Carter, in my opinion, he's the top waiver wire ad. He should be rostered everywhere. Add Jaden Reed. So hopefully you already have Jaden Reed because I talked about him on this show over the last few weeks. But if not, you should really consider adding him this week. He's not running a crazy number of routes. We know that's going to be the case in this Green Bay offense. But his target shares have been okay over the last 2 games. His 2 games since returning from injury. He's had a 19% and 17% target share. That's resulted in 10 total targets. He's caught 9 of those for 86 yards. Now, the Packers get the Bears and the Ravens to close out the fantasy season. The Bears are first in the NFL in adjusted fantasy points allowed to slot receivers this year. And Baltimore's been a top half matchup for slot wideouts too. And then all the while, Christian Watson's banged up. So Jaden Reed could be startable over the next couple of weeks. And in deeper formats, because of that Watson injury, you could look at Romeo Doubs too. Hold or drop Stefon Diggs. I'm very concerned about Stefon Diggs in fantasy football. It's been a really bad 3 weeks for him. Diggs has seen weaker route shares for most of the season, but 3 of his 5 lowest route participation rates have come over the last 3 games. And naturally, he hasn't seen high target shares as a result. He's had target shares of 9%, 13%, and 18% over his last 3. That comes after 2 games where his shares were 28% and 33%. And honestly, those 2 games, that's what's keeping the hold within this transaction. Otherwise, he'd be a drop. Because look, what if the Patriots just decide to use Diggs more in this offense? We have no real reason as to why his route share has been below 60% over his last 3 games. But what if they use him more? Then there could obviously be some usability. You just right now can't confidently play him this week against Baltimore. They do get the Jets next week though. So if we do see that uptick in route share, maybe you can use him in week 17. With all that being said though, I do think this is a potential drop situation. This could be a sabotage drop situation. That's if you want to play this a little bit riskier. You send Stefon Diggs to the waiver wire and you hope that someone in your league picks him up and starts him based on name value, not realizing that he's had horrible usage over his last 3 games. But look, I said this in the newsletter, I'll say it here. I'm just the deliverer of information here. And that information is that Stefon Diggs, at the very least, he's going to be very hard to plug into your lineup here in week 16. Add Jalen Coker. I think Jalen Coker is kind of an interesting add this week. He's been getting it done recently. He scored 17.4 and 14.0 PPR points over his last 2 games. He had 11.4 back in week 11. That's on target shares over his last 2 of 30% and 19%. And the Panthers get the Bucs this week. Tampa Bay, they've been relatively good as a matchup for wide receivers this year. And the Bucs, at the very least, they've allowed nearly 30 passing yards per game over expected. That's one of the worst rates in football. So for deeper leaguers, you could add Jalen Coker. Add Malik Davis. Javonte Williams hurt his shoulder on Sunday night, and while he did return to that game in the second half, he was kind of just used sporadically. It wasn't his normal workload. In his place was Malik Davis. He ran 13 routes according to PFF to Williams' 1 against the Vikings. Davis has actually not been that bad this year in limited action. According to Next Gen Stats, Davis has a rushing yards over expected per rush rate of plus 1.4 yards and a yards after contact per attempt of 4.4. Those numbers are both better than where Javonte Williams is at. And Davis, he also leads that backfield in success rate. That's not to say that he's better than Javonte Williams. There's a skill in handling a big workload. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying Malik Davis has not been that bad. And when you watch him, you can see some of that explosiveness. So if Williams does miss time with his shoulder, I'd expect Davis to see a decent amount of work. Add Jaleel McLaughlin. Another running back injury to monitor is with RJ Harvey. He departed Week 15's matchup against the Packers late in the game with an injury to his ribs. If he were to miss some time, we'd probably see a backfield split with Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Bidet. I think McLaughlin would likely take on more work. But here's the thing. The next 2 weeks, not the easiest matchups in the world. They get the Jags, who have been good against running backs, and then Kansas City, who also have been good against running backs. But if Harvey's out, there could be some usability with McLaughlin. Add Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Chris Rodriguez was a true game time decision in Week 15, and he ended up not playing. That tells me that he was probably close to playing in that game, which means this transaction is pretty iffy. Though to be fair, I think that's the case for a lot of these transactions this week. We don't have all of the injury information that we need. But Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, he just took on Chris Rodriguez's role. In standard Bill form, he saw a decent amount of work on the ground. He actually saw a season-high 18 carries, and he didn't see a single target. Jerry McNichols continued to play that pass-catching role. Now, there's always a chance that Rodriguez is just out again this week, so you could add Krosky-Merritt off the waiver wire. Just keep in mind, they play the Eagles this week. It's not necessarily an amazing matchup. Hold Justin Jefferson. Honestly, guys, it's crazy that this transaction even exists. But there were a couple of people who messaged me after Minnesota's Week 15 game against Dallas, asking if they should drop Justin Jefferson. And I would not drop Justin Jefferson. Now, are you possibly going to bench him? I mean, possibly, yes. He scored fewer than 5 PPR points in each of his last 3 games. Outside of that stretch, he's done that only 5 times throughout his entire career. It's been really bad for Justin Jefferson. But there is some good news. Jefferson had a 33% target share against the Cowboys on Sunday night. And even after that matchup against Dallas, Minnesota wideouts have the second best schedule in all of football according to my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers. They get the Giants and the Lions. Look, guys, at the end of the day, you don't want to be the person dropping Justin Jefferson for some random defense to watch your league mate pick him up and start him against you in the finals. Sometimes this time of year, you just need to keep guys on your roster, even if you're not totally into starting them that week. Add Jawar Jordan. Many of you saw Jawar Jordan pop up on Sunday for the Texans and you thought, who? One of the many benefits of doing the late round prospect guide each year is that when these random players pop up, I quickly remember their backstory and the kind of prospect that they were. With Jordan, the thing that kind of came to my mind, well, it wasn't that great. He's an undersized running back who didn't have a good collegiate production profile. Not only that, he ran a 4.56 40. So he's undersized and he wasn't that fast either. Honestly, I never expected Jawar Jordan to have 15 rush attempts in a single NFL game in his career. The fact that he did this past weekend, props to him. But hey, sometimes opportunity is all that matters at running back, especially in a plus matchup. And if Woody Marks, who hurt his ankle on Sunday, if he can't go this week, and if Nick Chubb is still sidelined, then Jordan could be in store for some fantasy production. Because the Texans, they get a great matchup against the Raiders. They rank as the 7th easiest matchup by adjusted points allowed to running backs. With all that being said, I wouldn't go crazy for Jordan off the waiver wire, because things sound optimistic with Woody Marks. Add Evan Hall and Audric Estime. Hey, look, more running back injuries in Week 15. This time, it was to Devin Neal. He had a hamstring injury against the Panthers. He didn't return to that game. That left a pure 50-50 split backfield with Evan Hall and Audric Estime. Now, if Devin Neal is out this week, assuming Alvin Kamara is too, we're going to see both Hall and Estime get some work. Usually, I wouldn't care that much about this. I mean, honestly, if we have a split backfield there, how usable are these running backs actually going to be? But New Orleans can actually see a neutral or positive game script this week. They get the Jets. Now, when it comes to these running backs as prospects, Hall was actually a really good pass catcher. That's what he did in college. He was a 3-down back. He got a lot of work. Audric Estime was not that. He didn't see that much work as a receiver. But in Week 15, it was Estime who was on the field during the 2-minute offense. Evan Hall seemed to be more the early down option. But because the Saints get the Jets this week, that game might be closer. And as a result, I'm going to lean Evan Hall over Audric Estime. But honestly, guys, it's anyone's guess. And I would only be getting these players in deeper leagues, like 14-team leagues. Or if you're just overly desperate. Add Colby Parkinson. Colby Parkinson is on an absolute heater right now. Since Week 10, and for the record, Tyler Higbee's season ended in Week 11, but since Week 10, Parkinson has averaged 13.5 PPR points per game. During that same time frame, that's more than Brock Bowers. Really, Parkinson's just getting by on touchdowns. He's been mentioned a decent bit on the Sleeper Show this year, so podcast listeners, you might already be aware of this. But Parkinson now has 6 touchdowns over his last 6 games. And then all the while, he hasn't hit a 20% target share in any of those contests. But one reason to really lean into Parkinson this week, well, there are 2 reasons. First, Devontae Adams, he hurt his hamstring. He could be sidelined on Thursday night. That'll force more looks to the other pass catchers in that offense. But second, for as good as Seattle's defense has been, they rank as the 10th best opponent for tight ends by adjusted points allowed. That's who LA gets this week. And they're 12th in adjusted target share allowed to the position. So really, Colby Parkinson is not a bad streamer this week. And also, don't sleep on Terrence Ferguson either. In Week 15, Ferguson saw a season-high 71% route share. That was the first time he'd been over a 50% route share. So with Devontae Adams injured, there's a chance that we see the Rams feature Ferguson more too. Add Tyler Algier. So look, we've been handcuffing running backs for a while now, but even still, Tyler Algier is out there in over 60% of Yahoo leagues. Not only is he Bijan Robinson insurance, but there could be some usability for Algier here in week 16. Atlanta gets Arizona this week, and the Cardinals have not been good against running backs this year, especially of late. Arizona ranks as the 6th best matchup for running backs by adjusted points allowed. They've given up 4 top 24 running back performances over the last 2 weeks. This is pre-Monday Night Football. Woody Marks is technically right on the edge there. But yeah, you heard that correctly. They've given up 4 RB2 or better performances over their last 2 games. Now, Algier did see a dip in running back rush share against Tampa Bay on Thursday night, but we could see a more ground-heavy approach from the Falcons in week 16. He's a potential flex play for needy teams, all while having that handcuff upside. Add Bryce Young. The Buccaneers defense, which is who Carolina gets this week, they rank as a top 5 matchup for quarterbacks by adjusted points allowed. They've been especially friendly to quarterbacks of late, giving up 18 or more standard fantasy points in each of their last 6 games. Now, there are some good passers that they faced. They faced Drake May, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Jacoby Brissett. But they've also given up a 21 and 27 point performance to Tyler Shuck and Kirk Cousins. That's over their last 2. This week, it's Bryce Young and this NFC South showdown. The game has a 3-point spread and a solid 45.5 point total. I don't think Bryce Young is the worst streamer in the world. Add the New Orleans Saints defense. So fantasy managers, they've been hoarding defenses. So on the advice front, from a content perspective, it's a little bit tougher to find widely available defenses for you to stream. But I don't mind New Orleans. They get the Jets this week. They're in New Orleans. They're 4.5 point favorites, and the game has a 40.5 point total. Process-wise, they should be fine. And then if they do play well, they get Tennessee in week 17. So you might be able to play them there too. Add the New York Giants defense. So as I just said, this time of year, percent roster numbers, they're not as favorable for defenses. People are stashing them like crazy. I don't feel amazingly excited about using the Giants defense this week. They get the Vikings. They're probably going to be like a middle-of-the-road defense. What's more intriguing for me is their Week 17 matchup against the Raiders. Vegas is the 2nd best matchup for defenses by adjusted points allowed, and they've allowed a top 10 defensive performance in fantasy across each of their last 6 games. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow with the weekly 10 Trends episode.
PCs powered by Snapdragon X Elite processors are made to go the distance. With blazing fast performance, next-level efficiency, and multi-day battery life, Snapdragon processors are built to tackle it all, from highlight reel editing to intense player research, so you can be at the top of your game wherever the day takes you. Learn more at snapdragon.com/laptops. Snapdragon, the heart of your PC.
Battery life varies significantly based on device settings, usage, and other factors.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parm delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes. Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.